The battlefield was silent. The Great War had ended only hours ago, but the smell of smoke and burned metal still floated in the air. Machines lay broken, ships crashed into the dirt, and the ground was covered with shadows of the fallen. Once there was noise of lasers, explosions, and screams, but now there was only the sound of the wind. In the middle of that silence stood one man, Commander Arik, leader of the human forces. He was tired, his armor scratched, his body heavy with pain, but his eyes were still sharp. He had fought for days without rest, and now he had claimed victory. The alien empire that had once promised to wipe out humanity was defeated, at least here on this field. Around him, his soldiers cheered weakly, raising their weapons in the air, but their voices were not full of joy. They had survived, yes, but the victory felt strange, heavy, like something unseen was waiting to fall upon them. Arik looked across the battlefield. The alien soldiers were dead or fleeing, their banners burned, their weapons broken. It was not an easy victory, it had cost too many lives. The humans had lost half their army, and many ships would never fly again, but still victory was his. And the stars would remember this day, or so he thought as he stood there. Breathing the cold night air, Arik felt something strange. It was like a pair of eyes watching him. Hidden in the dark, he turned, scanning the battlefield. Hand on his blade at first. There was nothing, only silence and smoke. But then he saw her. She walked slowly from the wreckage. Tall and proud, her silver armor was cracked, her face marked with dust and blood. But her presence was strong, almost royal. The soldiers around Arik raised their guns, ready to fire. But Arik lifted his hand and stopped them. Something about her made him pause. She was not just another survivor. She was someone more, someone important. When she reached the center of the battlefield, she dropped her broken spear. Then, to everyone's shock, she knelt. The soldiers gasped, whispering to each other. The enemy bows? What trick is this? Arik's heart beat faster. No enemy had ever bowed to him before. Enemies begged, enemies cursed, enemies fought until the last breath. But this woman, this alien leader, was kneeling before him. She spoke in her language, her voice low but steady. The translator device on Arik's wrist clicked and translated her words. By the law of my people, by the chain of the old ways, the victor binds the ruler of the defeated. The words fell heavy on the soldiers' ears. What did that mean? Some thought it was surrender. Others thought it was a trap. But Arik saw her eyes, and there was no fear, only fire. It was not weakness that made her kneel, it was tradition. A tradition older than any war they had fought. Arik felt unease crawl through his chest. He had wanted victory, but now victory brought something else, something dangerous. He looked at her and asked, "Who are you?" The translator spoke her answer. "I am Princess Kaelin, ruler of the fallen, bound now to you." The whispers around them grew louder. A princess, bound to the human commander? What did that mean for their armies, for the future, for him? Arik tried to speak, but his voice caught. He was a soldier, not a man of politics or alien laws. He had no desire to rule anyone, but tradition, as she said, was stronger than choice, stronger than war, stronger even than death. The bond of the victor and the defeated ruler could not be broken. The commander realized he had not only won a battle, he had stepped into something far greater, something he did not understand. The night grew darker. The fires of the battlefield burned lower, and still she knelt before him, bound not by chains, but by the will of her people's law. The soldiers stood silent, waiting for Arik's command. But Arik himself did not know what to say. He felt the weight of the stars pressing down on him. For victory was his, yes, but victory had come with a price he could not yet see, and in the shadows, unseen by the tired soldiers, other eyes watched. Enemies who were not yet defeated. Spies who would carry this news to the far reaches of the galaxy. The human commander had claimed victory, but now by tradition he was bound, and the true war was only beginning. The battlefield was quiet, but the silence was not peace. Smoke curled into the dark sky, carrying the scent of fire and blood. The human soldiers moved carefully, stepping over the remains of machines and bodies. They had won the battle, but none felt safe. All eyes were still on the woman kneeling before Commander Arik. She was not like the others, even broken and defeated. She had an aura that demanded respect. Her armor shone faintly under the burning wreckage, though it was cracked and torn. Her skin was pale with faint markings glowing like silver, and her long dark hair fell across her face. Her voice had been steady when she spoke her people's law. Now she remained silent, waiting, unshaken. The soldiers whispered. "She is dangerous," one said. "She is surrendering," said another. "No, this is a trick," a third muttered, gripping his rifle tighter. But Arik raised his hand again. "Hold," he ordered. And they obeyed, though uneasily. He looked at her carefully. Something in her eyes unsettled him. There was no fear, no hate, but also no softness. She looked at him as if he were part of her fate. Not as an enemy, not as a conqueror, but as something she could not escape. Finally he asked, "Why do you kneel?" The translator clicked, her voice repeated through the device. "Because you are the victor and I am bound to you." The words carried weight, heavier than any chain. The commander frowned. "Bound?" "Explain." The princess lifted her head, and for the first time she smiled, though it was not kind. "It is our way," she said. "When a ruler loses in battle, the victor claims her life, her honor, and her destiny." The soldiers gasped. Some laughed nervously, others cursed under their breath. Arik's chest tightened. He did not want ownership of anyone. He wanted an end to war. Not a bond with his enemy's princess, but tradition was powerful. Tradition had ended many wars without a single sword raised. Tradition had chained kingdoms together, and now it chained him to her. "Your people will not accept this," Arik said. "Your soldiers will see you as a traitor, Kaelin." The princess shook her head slowly. "No, they will see me as defeated. They will hate you, but they will honor the law." Her words were calm, almost cold. "As long as I live, I am yours, Commander." "That is the way." The commander turned away, trying to think. The soldiers around him stared. Unsure what this meant for their victory, some muttered, "Kill her, end the bond." "It's safer," others whispered. "Keep her, use her. She may give us control of her people." But Arik knew both paths were dangerous. Killing her could spark rebellion. Keeping her could invite betrayal. The war was over. Yet it felt like it had only just begun. As the night grew darker, the princess rose to her feet. She walked toward Arik with slow, steady steps. The soldiers aimed their rifles again, but Arik raised his hand once more. Her presence was heavy, like a storm moving closer. When she stopped before him, she bowed her head. "Where you go, I will follow," she said. "If you rise, I rise. If you fall, I fall." Her words were not spoken with emotion, but with unshakable certainty. The commander stared at her. This was not a prisoner, not a slave, not even an ally. This was something else. Something strange, something dangerous. The soldiers around him felt it too. Their victory no longer felt like triumph. It felt like the opening of a door to something far greater than a single battle. That night, as the camp was built, the soldiers rested with heavy hearts, but Kaelin did not rest. She stood outside the commander's tent like a shadow. Her armor still broken, her sword still sharp. When a soldier asked her, "Why guard him?" "You are the enemy," she answered only. "The bond cannot be broken until death." Inside his tent, Arik could not sleep. He thought of the countless men he had buried, the blood he had spilled, the victory he had claimed, and now beside all that he thought of her. The alien princess, the silent shadow, the unasked-for bond. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her kneeling, saw the fire in her gaze. He wondered if she waited for the moment he would fail, or if she truly meant to follow him into whatever came next. Outside, the night stretched long and cold. The fires burned low, and the stars looked down on the wounded land. But the true fire was not in the sky. It was in the bond between victor and defeated, a bond that had tied two fates together. And far beyond the battlefield, whispers already spread. The human commander and the alien princess, bound by war. The galaxy would soon tremble at what that meant. Morning came slowly over the battlefield. The sun touched the wreckage of ships, the broken weapons and the bodies of the fallen. The war was finished, but the land still felt heavy with death. The soldiers of humanity worked quietly, cleaning the field, gathering their wounded, but their eyes always returned to the strange sight. The alien princess walking beside their commander. Commander Arik felt the weight of her presence with every step. She did not speak much, yet she was always near. When he ordered the camp to move, she walked behind him. When he sat to eat, she stood guard, refusing food until he was finished. It was not loyalty, it was law, and the law was something no human in the camp understood. The soldiers whispered again and again. "She is dangerous, she should be locked away," one said. "No, she is a gift. We can use her to control her people," said another. But none of them dared to speak these thoughts too loudly, because whenever they looked at her eyes, they saw fire. Not the fire of hate, not the fire of defeat, but a fire that came from something deeper. A fire born of chains unseen. Arik called her to his tent that morning. He needed answers. She entered without hesitation, standing tall despite her wounds. "Explain this tradition again," he said. His voice sharp, the translator repeated his words, and she bowed her head slightly. "When a ruler is defeated in battle, the victor takes their fate," she said. "The chain is invisible, but it is real. It cannot be broken by words or by choice, only by death." Arik frowned. "So you are my prisoner?" Kaylin shook her head, her dark hair moving like a curtain. "No, not a prisoner. A prisoner has no honor. I have honor still, I am bound, but I walk free." "Then you are my ally," he pressed. Again she shook her head. "No, not ally, I cannot choose. I am yours because the law demands it, not because I wish it." Her words sent a cold weight through Arik's chest. This was worse than chains of iron. This was a chain of destiny, something he could not touch or cut. He had not asked for this, yet it was his. He had not wanted her life, yet now it was tied to his own. The commander leaned closer, his voice lower. "And if I die?" Kaylin's eyes met his, steady and calm. "Then I die also. The chain binds us to the same end." The words echoed in the tent like a curse. Arik sat back, silent, unsure if he should fear her or pity her. Outside, the soldiers continued their work. But rumors spread quickly. They spoke of the alien princess who walked unbound yet could not leave. They spoke of their commander who carried both victory and a curse. Some began to fear the tradition, calling it witchcraft. Others whispered that it was fate, that perhaps the stars themselves had tied the two together. That night, as the fires burned low, Arik walked through the camp everywhere he went. She followed. When he stopped, she stopped. When he turned, she turned. It was like a shadow that never left him. The men gave her space, but their fear was growing. A few even talked of ending her life before the chain could bring doom upon them all. But none dared, for her hand never left the hilt of her blade later. Arik found her standing alone near the edge of the camp. The moonlight fell across her face, her silver markings glowing faintly. He approached and asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" Kaylin turned slowly, her eyes unreadable.
"Hate is for enemies," she said. "You are not my enemy now."
"You are my fate." Her words struck him like a blade, not hate, not loyalty, but fate. A word heavier than both. Arik looked out at the stars, wondering what they thought of this chain that bound him. He had fought battles, killed enemies, buried his friends, but never had he faced something he could not fight. This tradition was stronger than his sword, stronger than his will. It had tied him to her, and her to him until the end. He whispered to himself, "This bond is not victory. It is a prison." But Kaylin heard, and answered softly, "No, Commander, it is not a prison, it is destiny. And destiny does not break." The night grew colder. The fires dimmed, but the bond between them burned stronger. A tradition of chains that could not be cut. And somewhere far away in the hidden halls of alien courts, the news spread like fire. The human commander and the alien princess were bound. And all who heard it knew. The true storm was still to come. The camp was alive with whispers. Soldiers repaired broken weapons, others buried their dead, and still others sharpened their blades for the battles yet to come. But no matter what work they did, their eyes always returned to her, the alien princess who now walked like a shadow behind their commander. Commander Arik felt her presence in every moment. She was there when he gave orders, she was there when he ate, she was there when he tried to rest. She never asked for comfort, never complained, never tried to run. Instead, she stood like a sentinel, silent and unshaken. The soldiers grew uneasy, for no chain held her wrists. No guard followed her, and yet she never left. It was not the grip of humans that bound her. It was the grip of her people's law. At night, when the campfires burned low, Arik tried to find peace in his tent, but sleep never came outside. He heard her footsteps pacing slowly. Steady and patient, she was guarding him, though no one had asked her to. When dawn broke, he stepped outside and found her still standing there, her sword at her side, her eyes sharp. He frowned. "Why do you guard me?" "You are my prisoner." She shook her head gently, her voice calm. "Not prisoner. Not guard, but bond. If you fall, I fall. So I must not let you fall." Her words echoed through his mind. There was no warmth in them, no affection, only certainty. It was a vow, an oath, spoken without hesitation. He wondered if she would one day turn that blade against him. But something in her tone told him that was not her path. She was not waiting for betrayal, she was waiting for destiny. Still, doubt grew inside the camp. Some soldiers whispered in corners, their voices sharp with fear. She stands too close, she hears too much. She could be a spy. She is planning to kill him in his sleep, another hissed. But others argued, did you not see her? She kneels, she follows, she obeys, this bond is real. The camp split into two voices, suspicion and uneasy trust, and in the middle stood Arik, caught between fear of tradition and fear of his own men. One evening, a soldier named Darren approached Arik in secret. His voice was low but urgent. Commander, you cannot keep her near, the men are afraid. Some speak of ending her life while you sleep if they act. We will have chaos in the camp. Arik stared at him for a long moment, then answered, and if they kill her, they kill me too. Darren frowned, confused, but Arik explained the bond, how their fates were tied. The soldier's face turned pale and he whispered, then we are cursed, before hurrying away. Later that night, Arik stepped out of his tent again. The camp was quiet, stars heavy in the sky. Kalen stood there as always, watching the shadows. He walked closer and asked softly, do you not wish to be free of this bond? She turned to him, her eyes glimmering in the moonlight. My wishes do not matter, Commander. My people's law is older than my life, older than my throne, older even than the stars we fight under. I cannot break it. And neither can you. Her words were like stone, solid and unmovable. Arik felt frustration burn inside him. He wanted to shout that he never asked for this, that he wanted victory without chains. But when he looked at her again, he saw no trick, no weakness, only strength wrapped in silence. She had lost her crown, her army, her world, yet she still stood tall. Her silence was not empty. It was power. For days this continued. She guarded him without rest, followed him without question. The soldiers began to call her the Shadow, and the name spread through the camp. Some grew used to her presence, some feared her more, but none could deny her resolve. When threats came from raiders in the night, she was the first to draw her blade. When spies tried to slip through the lines, it was her eyes that caught them. Again and again she proved her oath was real. Yet even as she fought to keep him safe, a question grew in Arik's heart. Was she protecting him because of the bond or because of something else? When she looked at him with those burning eyes, he could not tell. Was there hate hidden there, or a new kind of loyalty? He did not know, and the mystery gnawed at him. One night, when the fires were almost out, he asked her the question again. What are you waiting for, princess? To see me rise or to see me fall? Her answer came in a whisper carried by the cold wind. I wait for the moment fate chooses. Until then, I stand. And so she remained his silent oath. Neither friend nor enemy, neither ally nor prisoner. Bound by a chain stronger than iron, heavier than blood, her silence was louder than any word. Her oath was sharper than any blade. And though the camp tried to sleep, everyone knew the truth. The bond between them was no victory. It was the beginning of something darker, something that even the stars could not yet name. The camp grew restless. Days had passed since the battle was won, but peace had not returned. The humans tried to rebuild their machines, repair their weapons, and bury their dead, but the presence of the alien princess hung over them like a shadow that would not fade. Kalen, bound by tradition, followed Commander Arik wherever he went. She ate only after he ate. She slept only when he rested. And when he moved, she moved. Her silence was constant, her gaze sharp, her steps unshaken. She did not smile, did not cry, did not beg. And to the soldiers around her, that silence became a storm. Rumors spread first in whispers. She listens to everything, one soldier said. She will carry our secrets back to her people. No, another replied. She has no people left, she is ours now. But others muttered darker words. She is waiting for the moment to strike, the moment the commander looks away. The whispers grew louder with each passing day, until the camp itself felt divided. Some soldiers wanted her killed. Better to break this chain than let it drag us into ruin, they argued. Others believed she was an opportunity. With her bound, her people may surrender fully. We can use her, they said. But none of them truly understood the tradition. To them it was strange magic, a curse disguised as honor. Commander Arik heard the whispers too. He saw the way his men looked at her, the way their hands stayed close to their blades when she passed. He knew the bond was dangerous not only to him but to his army. If rebellion began within his own camp, the enemy would not need to fight. They would destroy themselves one night. He called his closest captains together. They gathered around a dim fire, their faces tired and tense. "She is dividing us," one said sharply. "Your men doubt you, Commander." "They think you are bewitched." Another leaned forward. "The bond makes you weak," they say. "They fear your judgment is clouded." Arik's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, a voice came from the darkness. "You speak of me as if I am not here." The captains turned quickly. Hands going to their swords, Kaylin stood just beyond the firelight, her silver markings glowing faintly. Her expression was unreadable, her voice calm. "I do not seek your trust. I do not seek your love. I seek only to fulfill the law of my people." She stepped closer, her eyes moving from one captain to the next. "But know this. If you raise a hand against me, you raise a hand against your commander, for his fate is tied to mine." The men stiffened, fear and anger mixing in their eyes. They could not strike her without risking their leader. And so the whispers of rebellion grew sharper, quieter, more dangerous, not shouted in the open, but carried in the shadows of the camp. A few nights later, Arik awoke to the sound of steel. Assassins had slipped into the camp, masked figures with blades drawn. They moved for his tent, silent as shadows. But before they reached him, Kaylin was already there. Her sword flashed in the moonlight, her movements swift and merciless. In moments, the assassins lay bleeding in the dirt. When the soldiers rushed to the scene, they found the princess standing over the bodies, her blade red, her expression cold. She looked at Arik and said, "This is the chain. Commander, my life for yours, your fate for mine." The men watched in silence. Torn between fear and awe, she had saved him. Yet they wondered if she had also placed him in greater danger. For if assassins came once, they would come again. And always, she would be there, standing in the middle of the storm. The whispers did not stop, some soldiers said. "She protects him because she must, not because she cares." "One day she will turn," others said. "Without her, the commander would already be dead. We owe him to her." The camp split more and more, lines drawn in silence, waiting for someone to break them. Arik felt the pressure growing. Every step he took was watched. Every decision judged. His men doubted him. His enemies hunted him, and beside him walked the princess bound by law. He began to wonder if victory had been a lie, if the real war was not against the alien empire, but against the shadows within his own camp. One evening, as the stars burned above, Kaylin spoke words that chilled him. "You fear your soldiers will rise against you," she said. Not asking but stating, Arik looked at her, weary but firm. "They fear what they do not understand." Kaylin nodded once. "Then they will test you, Commander, and when they do, I will stand beside you, for if you fall, I fall." Her oath was clear, her voice steady. But the fire in her eyes was sharp. Arik wondered if her loyalty was his salvation or his curse. The whispers of rebellion had not yet turned to open fire, but they would. And when that moment came, the fate of the camp would rest on the bond neither of them had chosen, and far beyond their campfires the galaxy listened. Whispers spread through broken fleets and distant courts. The commander and the princess, bound by tradition, divided by suspicion, standing at the edge of rebellion. The true battle was not yet on the field. It was in the hearts of men, and in the silence between two fates chained together. The camp was uneasy. The whispers of rebellion had not vanished. They had only grown quieter, sharper, more dangerous. The soldiers worked by day and watched each other by night. Trust was thin. Suspicion was heavy. And at the center of it all stood Commander Arik and the alien Princess Kaylin. Bound together by law, every night she stood outside his tent, her hand never far from the hilt of her sword. Every morning she followed him as he gave orders. Silent but unshakable. To some she was a shield. To others she was a curse, and in the darkness of doubt, men began to test their fate. The first test came quietly. A soldier slipped poison into the commander's drink. Arik lifted the cup to his lips, but before he could drink, Kaylin's hand shot out. Her eyes narrowed, her voice cold. "Do not touch it," she said. The commander frowned but obeyed, and when she poured the drink onto the ground, the dirt smoked, the camp froze in silence. The soldier who had poisoned him tried to flee, but Kaylin's blade found him before he reached the shadows. She stood over the body, her eyes burning. "This is the chain," she whispered. "Your death is my death." and I will not allow it. The second test came in the night. A group of men, faces hidden, blades ready, crept into the commander's tent. Arik reached for his weapon, but Kaelin was already moving. Her sword cut through the dark, her strikes precise and merciless. The tent was filled with the clash of steel and the cries of dying men. By the time the soldiers rushed inside, the assassins lay dead at her feet. Arik breathed heavily, staring at her as she cleaned her blade. "Why do you fight so hard for me?" he asked. Her answer was the same, calm and unbroken. "Because if you fall, I fall," but her words only deepened the mystery. She fought not like someone trapped by duty, but like a warrior who had chosen her battle. Yet every time Arik searched her eyes for truth, he found only silence. A silence that guarded more than just his life. The third test was the deadliest at dawn. A hidden bomb tore through the edge of the camp. Explosions lit the sky, fire consumed tents. Men screamed as steel ripped through the air. In the chaos, a shadow moved toward Arik, a figure armed with a blade longer than any human carried. The assassin leapt, aiming for the commander's heart. But Kaelin met him mid-strike. The clash shook the air, sparks flying. Her blade locked with his, and their strength seemed equal. For the first time, Arik saw her pushed to the edge. The fight raged through the burning camp. The assassin's strikes were quick and brutal. But Kaelin moved like fire itself. Steel rang against steel, each blow carrying the weight of death. The soldiers watched in awe, some too afraid to interfere. It was not just a fight, it was a test, not only of Kaelin's oath, but of her will to keep it at last. With a cry that cut through the chaos, she drove her blade into the assassin's chest. The figure staggered, dropped his weapon, and fell. Kaelin stood over him, her chest heaving, her eyes still burning with cold fire. She turned to Arik, blood on her blade, smoke around her, and whispered, "Do not mistake this for love." The words struck him harder than any weapon. She had saved his life again, but her voice was sharp, almost cruel. Arik stared at her, confused, his heart torn between gratitude and fear. "Then why?" he asked, his voice low, almost broken. Kaelin looked at him, her face calm but her eyes storming. "Because fate has no mercy, Commander, and neither do I." The soldiers carried the bodies away, rebuilt the camp. But the story spread. 3 times death had reached for their leader. 3 times the princess had stood in the way. Some now whispered of her as a guardian. Almost sacred, others said she was the danger itself, drawing death to their commander again and again. But none could deny her oath, her blade, her fire. That night, as the camp lay in uneasy silence, Arik sat alone in his tent, her words echoed in his mind. "Do not mistake this for love." He wondered if she spoke the truth. Was she only bound by law? Or was there something deeper hidden behind her silence he could not tell? And that mystery pressed heavier on him than the weight of any battle. Outside, Kaelin stood as always, silent and steady. Her eyes scanned the darkness. Her hand rested on her sword. She did not speak. But the air around her carried the promise of her vow. If death came again, she would meet it with steel. For her fate was his, and his fate was hers. A deadly test had been given and passed, but the chain between them grew tighter. And in the distance beyond the stars, greater enemies waited. Enemies that would test not just their bond, but the very fate of their worlds. The camp had survived the poison, the assassins, and the fire. Each test had been met by the alien princess's blade. Each danger had been cut down before it could claim Commander Arik's life. But even as the camp tried to heal, a new shadow stretched across the stars, one that neither humans nor Kaelin's people had expected. It began with the scouts. They returned from the far edges of the system with fear in their eyes. "There are ships," they reported. "Not hers, not ours, something else, moving fast, watching us." The words spread through the camp like cold wind. Soldiers glanced at the sky, searching the darkness for shapes that should not be there. And though no enemy fired, the silence felt like a threat sharper than any blade. Arik stood on the edge of the battlefield. Staring at the stars, Kaelin stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "These are not your people," he said. "No," she answered, her voice steady. "They are worse," he turned to her. "Who are they?" She looked back at the sky, her eyes hard. "The unseen," she whispered. "They wait until blood is spilled. Then they come like vultures to a corpse, but vultures do not bring mercy. They bring death." The commander's jaw tightened. His army was broken, half their machines were gone. Their supplies were thin if another force attacked now. They would not survive, he glanced at her. The chain-bound princess, Will they strike you too? He asked. Kalen nodded slowly. They do not care for law, they do not care for bonds. They will kill us both if they can, and they will claim what remains. That night the camp was restless. Men sharpened their weapons, others stared at the sky, some whispered, "We cannot fight another enemy." "Not now," others muttered. "Perhaps they come for her. Not for us," but none truly believed that. Everyone knew the truth. When war calls, it calls for all. At dawn, the first of the ships appeared. Dark shapes sliding out of the void. Their hulls black as shadows, their lights burning cold. They made no call, no demand, no warning. They simply hung above the battlefield like predators watching prey. The soldiers clutched their weapons. But Arik raised his hand. "Hold," he ordered. His voice steady, though his heart pounded. "We cannot strike first. Not until we know." Kalen stepped closer, her eyes never leaving the sky. "They will not speak," she said quietly. "They never do, they only test to see if you are weak. And then they take." Her words proved true. Moments later, a beam of light cut across the camp, destroying a supply wagon. The earth shook, fire rose, men screamed. And still the ships did not speak? Chaos followed. Soldiers scrambled for weapons. Shouting orders, the camp's guns turned to the sky. But before Arik gave the command, Kalen's voice rang out. "Wait," she said. "If you fight too soon, they will crush you. You must show them strength, but not fear." Her words were strange, yet her tone carried the weight of truth. Arik hesitated, then lowered his hand. The men obeyed, though their anger burned. The ships circled like wolves, striking at the edges of the camp. Never a killing blow, only enough to spread terror. One by one the soldiers began to break. Some shouted, "We must fire now." Others cried, "No, it's a trap." The camp stood on the edge of panic, and in the middle of it Arik and Kalen stood side by side. When the next beam struck, this time aimed at the commander himself, Kalen moved. Her body shielded his, her blade raised, though no blade could block such power. The blast missed by inches, burning the ground behind them. She turned to him, her voice sharp. "Do you see now? They are not hunting your army. They are hunting you, and because of the bond, they hunt me too." Arik's chest tightened. He had expected open war, but this was worse. This was a game of fear. A game of breaking hearts before breaking bodies. The unseen enemy did not just strike with weapons, they struck with patience. And patience could destroy an army as surely as fire. By nightfall the ships were gone, slipping back into the darkness as silently as they had come, but their shadow remained. The men looked to the sky, their hands trembling, their hearts shaken. They whispered of the unseen, of monsters that came when war was over. To devour the weak, Arik gathered them, speaking words of strength. But he saw the doubt in their eyes. The enemy had not needed to kill many. They had left fear instead later. As the camp settled into uneasy silence, Arik spoke to Kalen. "Why do they hunt now?" She looked at him, her eyes burning in the firelight. "Because you are wounded, Commander, because victory has cost you. And weakness calls to them like blood calls to beasts." Her words were heavy. Like stone upon his shoulders, he asked quietly, "Can we defeat them?" Kalen's gaze turned to the sky again, her voice low. "No, not as we are, but together we may endure. If you rise, I rise, if you fall, I fall, and the unseen will take us both." The oath hung in the air, stronger now than ever. A bond of survival, a bond of fate. The unseen enemy had come, and though they had left the battlefield in silence, they had left a promise too. They would return, and when they did, the true test of the chain would begin.